The unwanted gift. The great hall of the alien king was filled with silence. Hundreds of nobles, warriors, and advisors stood around the massive throne, waiting for the king's next command. Outside, the twin suns of the planet burned hot, but inside the hall the air was cold with tension. The tall doors creaked open. Every eye turned toward the entrance. A human envoy walked in, dressed not in armor, but in simple black robes. Behind him, two alien guards pushed forward a small figure, wrapped in a silver cloak. The human moved with confidence, but the small figure behind him seemed to hesitate at every step. The human bowed low before the throne. "Great King," he said, his voice steady, "I bring you a gift." The king narrowed his glowing red eyes. "A gift from humans?" he sneered. "Humans are weak. Your gifts are worthless." The human smiled calmly. "This gift is different. This is your future." He pulled the silver cloak away. Gasps filled the hall. Standing before the king was a young alien girl, no more than 17 years old. Her skin shimmered softly like moonlight. Her long hair, silver with hints of violet, fell over her slender shoulders. She looked delicate, almost fragile, but there was strength hidden in her bright blue eyes. The nobles began whispering. Everyone knew her. She was the king's distant niece, the princess who had been declared infertile. To their people, an heirless princess was useless. She had been quietly sent away, forgotten by most. "Why would I want broken blood?" the king growled. The human remained calm. "Because broken things can be remade stronger. And because sometimes, power lies where you least expect it." The king rose from his throne, his heavy footsteps echoing through the silent hall. He circled the girl, studying her like a general inspecting a weapon. The girl stood still, her chin lifted, refusing to show fear. "What is your plan, human?" the king demanded. "Do you think giving me trash will earn you mercy?" The human shook his head. "No, great king. I offer no mercy. I offer you a chance to reshape destiny." The king laughed, a deep, cruel sound. He turned to his council. "Send her to the lower quarters. Let her clean the halls she once walked as royalty." The girl bowed her head slightly but said nothing. She followed the guards without resistance, her bare feet silent against the cold stone floor. As she disappeared down the long corridor, the human envoy remained kneeling before the king. "You should be careful," the king said, his voice low. "Your games could cost you your life." "Perhaps," the human said softly, "or perhaps it will cost you more." The king's eyes flashed with anger, but he waved his hand dismissively. "Go. Your life bores me." The human bowed again and left the hall, a small smile hidden on his lips. Deep inside the palace, the young alien girl sat alone in a dark stone room. She touched the small silver bracelet hidden under her sleeve, feeling the warmth of the human technology inside it. A secret message, a secret mission. She closed her eyes and remembered the words the human had whispered to her before they entered the hall. "You are not broken. You are the key. When the time comes, remember who you are." Far above her, the stars shifted. Fate had already begun to move. The unwanted gift had been given. But it was no gift at all. It was the beginning of a storm that would tear the galaxy apart. The princess's shame, the small stone room was cold and empty. No bed, no blanket, just rough walls and a cracked floor. The young alien princess sat alone, knees pulled to her chest, her silver hair tangled around her face. Outside the iron door, guards stood like silent statues, keeping her trapped in her new life. Hours passed, or maybe days. There was no window to tell her the time. She touched the small silver bracelet, hidden under her sleeve again, feeling the soft thrum of life within it. It was her only link to the outside world now, the only proof that someone still believed in her. She had once walked the golden halls of the palace with her head high. Once the court had bowed to her, had whispered about her beauty and grace, but the whispers had changed when she failed the royal trials, the sacred tests of fertility, a cruel tradition that decided the worth of every royal daughter. And when she had failed, the king himself had declared her unfit, a stain on his bloodline. Now she was less than a servant, A discarded pawn. A shame to her house. The iron door creaked open. She did not move. A tall alien woman entered wearing the armor of the royal enforcers. Her sharp eyes scanned the princess with disgust. "Get up," the woman snapped. "The king wishes to display his mercy." The princess rose slowly, her body aching from sitting so long on the cold floor. She followed the woman through winding halls, past curious guards and sneering nobles. Whispers floated behind her like smoke. The broken one. A curse to the king's name. She should have been left to die. The princess kept her head down, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. Her heart burned with anger, but she buried it deep. They reached a grand hall filled with alien courtiers and military officers. At the center stood the king, dressed in golden armor, his red eyes gleaming with pride and cruelty. "Behold," the king said, his voice booming across the hall, "the gift given to us by the humans, the last reminder of their weakness." A cruel laugh rippled through the crowd. The human envoy stood quietly near the wall, watching everything with calm eyes. The princess was forced to kneel before the king. She felt every mocking gaze, every hateful thought aimed at her. The king stepped closer, towering above her. "You are nothing," he said softly, so only she could hear. "You are a tool, and tools do not have honor." The princess said nothing. She bowed lower, hiding the rage that boiled inside her. The king turned away. "She will serve in the outer chambers," he declared. "Let her clean the halls of the soldiers. Let her remember every day what she has lost." As the guards dragged her away, the princess caught a glimpse of the human envoy. For just a moment, their eyes met. And in that moment, something passed between them, not pity, not sorrow. Something harder, something stronger. A promise. Deep inside her, the princess swore an oath. She would not remain broken. She would not let the king use her shame against her. She would find a way to rise again, even if it meant tearing apart the very throne that had cast her down. The cold hall swallowed her, but inside her heart, a fire had been lit. Far above the palace, hidden among the stars, unseen forces were already moving. Plans older than the king's rule were coming to life. The unwanted gift was more dangerous than anyone realized, and soon, the galaxy would remember her name. The human secret plant. The days inside the lower chambers were long and cruel. The young alien princess scrubbed floors, polished armor, and carried supplies for soldiers who once bowed to her. Her hands, once soft, were now rough and bruised. The silver glow of her skin had dulled under the dirt and cold, but her eyes still burned with silent fire. The human envoy stayed in the palace, moving through the halls like a shadow. He spoke little, smiled less, and watched everything. The nobles mocked him behind closed doors. They whispered that the humans had grown weak, soft. They did not see the careful steps he took, the silent notes he made, the secret messages he sent through the tiny device hidden inside his ring. One night, while the moons hung low over the palace, the human found his way to the servant quarters. He waited in the shadows near the back kitchens where the walls were cracked and old guards slept at their posts. The princess passed by, carrying a basket of broken weapons to the forge. Her steps faltered when she saw him, but she did not stop. She had learned not to draw attention. "Princess," he whispered, his voice almost lost in the wind. She froze. No one had called her that in weeks. He stepped closer, keeping his head low. In his hand was a small silver cube glowing faintly. "This is not your end," he said quietly. "This is the beginning." The princess shook her head. "I am nothing now," she said bitterly. "The king made sure of that." The human smiled slightly. "Then let us show him that nothing can be more dangerous than something he no longer fears." He placed the cube in her hand. It was warm and pulsing with life. "When the time comes," he said, "use this." "What does it do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It will reveal the truth," he answered. "And the truth is the weapon they fear most." Before she could ask more, he slipped back into the shadows, disappearing like smoke. The princess hid the cube beneath her torn cloak. Her heart pounded in her chest. She did not know whether to feel hope or fear. Days turned into weeks. The king grew restless. Rumors spread through the court. Humans were gathering, building alliances, making moves unseen by the great empires. The king laughed at the rumors, mocking the idea that humanity could ever pose a threat. But deep inside, a sliver of doubt grew, and in the dark corners of the palace, the human secret plan slowly came to life. The princess trained in secret, using every free moment to study the palace's guards, its schedules, its weaknesses. She learned where the old escape tunnels lay buried, forgotten by time. She learned which guards were loyal to gold more than to honor. And all the while, she waited for the signal. The moment the human promised would come, one night, a strange sound echoed through the lower halls. A low hum, almost like a heartbeat. The cube hidden in the princess's cloak began to glow softly. It was time. As she slipped through the darkened corridors, avoiding the guards and the flickering lights, she realized something she had not dared to believe before. She was not a prisoner. She was a weapon, and she was ready to be unleashed. In the grand throne room above, the king celebrated another small victory against a rebellious colony. He did not know that deep beneath his feet, the very future he feared most was about to awaken, and this time, no amount of power would save him. The bond grows stronger. The night was silent, but the palace walls trembled with hidden tension. Above, the king and his nobles feasted, unaware that something ancient and unstoppable had already begun to move beneath their feet. The young alien princess moved like a shadow through the empty service corridors, her heart racing. She clutched the glowing silver cube tightly against her chest. Every step forward was a step away from fear, and a step toward something new, something dangerous. She reached the secret meeting place, an old storeroom hidden behind broken pipes and forgotten crates. There, standing in the dim light of a cracked overhead lamp, waited the human envoy. His dark cloak blended into the shadows. Only his eyes, sharp and determined, caught the faint light. "You made it," he said softly, relief in his voice. The princess nodded, still catching her breath. "What now?" she whispered. The human handed her a small device and a tiny communicator. "From now on, you're not alone," he said. "We are connected." For a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of the moment sinking into both of them. Two broken beings abandoned by their own people, finding strength in each other. "You trust me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The human smiled, a small, tired smile. "I trust you more than I trust anyone in this cursed empire." The princess felt something inside her stir, something she had buried deep long ago. Hope. For the next few nights they met in secret. The human taught her everything she would need to know: how to slip past guards unnoticed, how to plant small devices in hidden places, how to read the signs of rebellion growing quietly among the palace servants. They trained in silence, communicating, with small gestures, a look, a nod. Words were dangerous here. Trust had to be earned without them. Slowly, their bond grew. Not as ruler and servant, not as leader and follower, but as partners in a war no one else could see coming. One night, while hiding behind a storage crate, they heard footsteps approaching. The princess tensed, ready to fight or flee. The human touched her hand gently, signaling her to stay calm. His touch was firm, steady, unafraid. The footsteps passed without incident, but her heart pounded wildly, not from fear, but from something else, something she did not dare name yet. "You're strong," the human said afterward. "Stronger than they ever allowed you to be." She looked away, ashamed. "I'm broken," she said bitterly. "I was thrown away." The human tilted her chin up gently so that she would meet his eyes. "Broken things can still change the world," he said. "Sometimes they are the only ones who can." Those words stayed with her long after he had disappeared into the shadows again. But unknown to both of them, someone else had seen their meeting. High in the rafters above the palace halls, a pair of golden eyes watched their growing bond with quiet hatred. A spy loyal to the king had caught a glimpse of the human and the princess together. And soon, the king would know that the gift he had accepted so proudly was now the greatest threat to his throne. Danger was coming, betrayal was near, and the bond that had begun in secret would soon be tested in ways neither the human nor the princess could imagine. Above the palace, dark clouds gathered, covering the twin moons. The world held its breath, waiting for the first strike, and somewhere deep inside her heart the princess no longer felt fear. She felt destiny calling. The shocking truth revealed the next day. The palace buzzed with strange tension. Whispers passed through the halls like a cold wind. The king paced in his private chamber, his sharp red eyes burning with silent rage. Something was happening, something beyond his control, and he could feel it in his bones. The spy had delivered his report during the early hours of the morning. The news was simple but deadly. The princess was no longer broken. The princess had become dangerous. And worst of all, she was no longer alone. The king crushed a goblet in his hand, the metal folding like paper under his strength. Betrayal, right, under his own roof. Betrayal by blood. He summoned his most trusted enforcers and gave one simple order: watch her every move. Meanwhile, hidden deep within the palace kitchens, the princess met with the human one last time before the plan would unfold. "Everything is ready," the human whispered, his voice low. "When the signal comes, you must act without fear." The princess nodded. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to do. The cube in her pocket pulsed with quiet energy. The truth was ready to be unleashed. As the sun dipped below the palace walls and the halls filled with golden light, the king called a grand assembly. Nobles, warriors, and diplomats crowded the throne room. It was a celebration, he said, a show of strength. But hidden behind his cold smile was a trap. The princess was ordered to stand near the center of the room, silent and obedient. She bowed her head, hiding the silver cube tucked into the folds of her cloak. The human envoy was there too, standing quietly among the guests, his face unreadable. The king rose from his throne, raising a jeweled staff high above his head. "Today," he declared, "we remind the galaxy that weakness has no place among us." The crowd roared with approval, and that was the signal. The princess moved quickly, pressing her fingers against the cube's smooth surface. The small device shimmered, then vanished from sight, activating its hidden program. A soft hum filled the room, unnoticed at first under the noise. Then the great holographic screens along the walls flickered to life. The crowd fell silent. Images began to play. Secret images, stolen from the king's own archives. Records of betrayal, lies, cruelty, proof that the king himself had sabotaged his own royal bloodline, had manipulated the sacred trials to declare his niece infertile, all to prevent a future threat to his throne. Gasps filled the air. Noblemen looked at each other in horror. Warriors shifted uncomfortably. The king roared in fury. "Lies," he shouted. "Forgeries." But the evidence was clear. Every document carried the royal seal. Every recording showed his own face, his own voice. The human envoy stepped forward, his voice calm, but loud. "The galaxy does not fear weakness," he said. "It fears injustice, it fears tyranny." The princess lifted her head. For the first time in weeks, she stood tall, her eyes blazing like twin stars. The court erupted into chaos. Some nobles demanded answers. Others turned and fled, their loyalty shaken. The guards hesitated, unsure whom to protect. The king's face twisted in rage. He pointed at the princess. "Seize her!" he screamed. But the princess was ready. With swift, trained movements, she activated the second function of the cube, a blinding flash of light that stunned the guards nearest to her. The human moved too, pulling a hidden weapon from under his cloak. Together they pushed through the confusion, racing toward the ancient service tunnels the princess had memorized. Behind them, the throne room collapsed into shouting, betrayal, and violence. The truth had been revealed. The king's mask had fallen, and the princess, once broken and forgotten, had just become the greatest symbol of rebellion the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. But the fight was far from over. The real war was only beginning. The king's fury unleashed. The halls of the palace shook with the king's rage. Golden. Banners were torn from the walls. Statues of past rulers lay smashed on the marble floor. The scent of burning cloth filled the air. Guards raced through the corridors, searching for the princess and the human who had exposed the greatest lie ever hidden by the royal bloodline. The king stood at the center of the ruined throne room, his face twisted with anger, his fists clenched so tightly that blood dripped from his palms. His voice thundered through the palace, carried by every speaker, reaching every ear. "Bring them to me," he roared. "Alive or dead, I do not care." The nobles, once loyal, now scattered like frightened birds. Many fled the palace, fearing the storm that had been unleashed. Others, hoping to earn favor, gathered their private guards and joined the hunt. Deep in the lower levels of the palace, the princess and the human moved swiftly through hidden tunnels, carved centuries ago, long forgotten by most. The glow of the silver cube guided their way, flickering softly in the darkness. Their breaths were sharp, every step careful but urgent. "He knows," the princess whispered. "He always knew," the human replied. "He just never believed you would fight back." They reached a fork in the tunnels. The human hesitated, checking the small holographic map projected from his ring. "This way," he said, pointing left. As they moved, heavy footsteps echoed behind them. The king's elite guards, larger, faster, and more brutal than any others, were closing in. The princess gripped a small blade hidden in her sleeve. She had no illusions. If they were caught, there would be no mercy. They reached an old service gate sealed with rusted metal. The human worked quickly, planting a small explosive charge on the lock. 5 seconds, he warned. They ducked behind. A fallen pillar just as the gate exploded outward, the blast muffled but powerful. Smoke and dust filled the tunnel. They ran through the broken gate into the night beyond the palace walls. Above them, the twin moons bathed the world in pale light. Freedom was close. But so was death. Shouts rang out behind them. Flashes of red, energy bolts sliced through the air, missing them by inches. The princess stumbled, but the human caught her arm, pulling her forward. "Keep moving," he shouted. They darted through the outer gardens, weaving between ancient trees and crumbling statues. Behind them, the king's guards poured into the open, relentless in their pursuit. A beam of energy struck a nearby tree, sending it crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks and burning leaves. The princess gasped for breath, her muscles screaming in pain, but she refused to stop. They reached the old wall, the last barrier between them and the wild lands beyond the city. The human boosted her up first. She climbed, scraping her hands on the rough stone. Just as she reached the top, a guard grabbed the human's cloak and yanked him backward. The princess cried out. Without thinking, she leapt down, slamming into the guard with all her strength. They crashed to the ground together. The princess rolled to her feet, grabbing the human's arm and dragging him toward the wall again. This time, they climbed together, scaling the crumbling stones while energy bolts hissed around them. At the top, they paused for a moment, staring back at the palace. Fires burned inside the walls. Chaos reigned. The king's rule had been broken, but his fury had only just begun. "He will hunt us," the princess said. "Let him try," the human answered, a grim smile on his face. They disappeared into the wild lands, swallowed by the darkness of the night. Behind them, the king stood atop the highest tower, watching the tiny figures vanish into the horizon. His hands trembled with rage. His mind burned with hatred. "Send the assassins," he commanded his chief enforcer. "Send every hunter, every killer. I want their heads brought to me." The enforcer bowed deeply. "As you command, great king." Thus began the most ruthless hunt the galaxy had ever seen. And in the shadows of ruined cities and ancient forests, the true battle for the future was about to begin. The heir of two worlds. The wild lands were a place of silence and ancient ruins. Once, mighty cities had stood here, but now only broken stones and twisted trees remained. It was a dead place, forgotten by both kings and rebels. But for the young, alien princess and the human, it became their refuge. Days turned into weeks as they traveled through shattered forests, across dry rivers, and under the endless twin moons. Every step was a battle against hunger, cold, and the soldiers that hunted them like beasts. But still, they survived. The bond between them grew stronger. The human taught the princess how to move unseen, how to find shelter in the ruins, how to read the stars. She taught him the old songs of her people, the forgotten names of the winds, and the secret signs that could open hidden doors. In each other they found strength, but danger was never far. One night, as a heavy mist rolled across the ruined plains, the human and the princess made camp inside an old temple. Broken statues of alien gods stared down at them with cracked stone faces. The princess sat close to the small fire, holding her cloak tightly around her. Her hand rested on her stomach without thinking, a small and unconscious gesture. The human noticed. He said nothing at first, but the worry in his eyes grew. Finally, he spoke. "You have been different." The princess hesitated, then nodded slowly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I carry the heir." The human stared at her, stunned. "But you were declared," he began, but the words died on his tongue. "I was never infertile," she said, her eyes shining with fierce pride. "It was a lie the king created to erase me." The human moved closer, lowering his voice. "Then your child, it will be both." She nodded. Half human, half alien, a bridge between two worlds. For a long moment they sat in silence, the weight of the future pressing down on them. "The king will never allow it," the human said quietly. "Then we must make sure he cannot stop it," the princess answered, her voice steady. As the fire crackled, they made their plan, not to fight armies, not to win battles, but to survive, to endure, to protect the life growing inside her, the life that could change everything. Across the galaxy, the king's fury spread. Bounty hunters, assassins, and mercenaries were sent to every corner of space. Rewards were promised. Entire planets were threatened. Yet still, the princess and the human slipped through the cracks, becoming legends whispered in the dark. They found allies among those who had suffered under the king's cruel rule. Outcasts, rebels, forgotten soldiers. Slowly, quietly, a new army was born, not of flags and empires, but of hope and anger. As the seasons changed, the princess grew stronger. The light in her eyes returned, fierce and unbreakable. The human stood always by her side, his loyalty unshaken. One night, as the stars burned bright above them, the princess climbed to the highest cliff overlooking a valley filled with their hidden followers. The human stood beside her. "Are you ready?" he asked. She smiled, a smile filled with sorrow and hope. "I was born ready," she said. She raised her hand high, and in the valley below fires were lit, hundreds of them, burning against the darkness, a signal to the galaxy, warning to the king, and a promise to all those who had ever been broken, cast aside or forgotten. The heir of two worlds was coming, and nothing could stop the future now.